I have been waiting a long ass time to see this documentary, and I never, ever get excited about documentaries. Side by Side. Side by Side is a documentary that focuses on the history, process, and workflow of both digital and photochemical film creation. It shows what artists and filmmakers from all over the world have been able to accomplish with both film and digital, and how their needs and innovations have been pushing filmmaking in new directions. It is written and directed by Christopher Kenneally, hosted by Keanu Reeves, and has a bevy of interviews with world-famous filmmakers and artists. I need my phone here because there are just too many names. You ready? In no particular order: Wally Pfister, John Malkovich, George Lucas, James Cameron, David Fincher, David Lynch, Robert Rodriguez, Martin Scorsese, Steven Soderbergh, the Wachowskis, Christopher Nolan, Joel Schumacher, Greta Gerwig, Lars von Trier, Walter Murch, Richard Linklater, Danny Boyle. All these people in one film. Dude! The Avengers of filmmaking. Now, not every famous director or cinematographer is in this film, but I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. First, let me just say that Keanu Reeves did a great job with these interviews. You can tell that he had a lot of passion for these interviews. He really was concerned for the subject, and he wasn't just going out there to kill time. And as somebody who's going into this business, film, telling stories visually, it's a very interesting subject, and it's a very apparently controversial subject. Because you have people like Chris Nolan and Wally Pfister who are firm believers in film and really aren't gonna let go until they are pretty much forced to, and film is ripped from their hands. Then there are people who are basically just like, as long as it helps me tell a story, that's fine. I mean, I'll just go with the flow. And it isn't just with this medium, because halfway through the film I thought to myself, this is just like how, comparing how we read books. Because, we used to read books, these books that would open up, we feel the pages, hardcover, softcover. And now we have these tablets that help, flip the pages for us, the experience is different. And it's the same with film, because essentially we're still telling stories, it's just how we're going about telling the stories. And some people think that with this digital age, progressing and whatnot, film is gonna die essentially, and no one else will be shooting with film within 5 or 10 years. And arguably that might be the case, because my school that I'm going to now has Super 8 cameras that we can, optionally film our movies with. And while I personally don't really have an inkling to do that, I still might try it. It's one of those things where I feel like the longer we have this old version of making movies around, the more we appreciate films in general. Because at the end of the day, I feel like people nowadays are worried more with how good their film looks compared to others. And it's not about how it looks, because if you have a good story, if you have a solid story with interesting characters, the story drives everything, okay? It's not about how it looks necessarily. Take Avatar, for instance, okay? Avatar is a great movie, it looks beautiful, but the fact is it has a very simple story. The story is just there to be there. I mean, in essence, Avatar is all about the visuals. And that's the thing with digital, is that I feel like with this film it was telling us how professionals are worried that with digital it's no longer about the story. And with film, with photochemical film, which we started out with back in the 1800s, that was really where it was about the story. No one cared how it looked. It was essentially about what was happening in the frame. It wasn't about how the frame looked. And you can argue it both ways, because some people just prefer the look of film and some people prefer the look of digital. Take my reviews, for instance, because I used to shoot on this really crappy standard def camera, which, is it around here? No, it's not. And now I have finally converted, as you probably noticed, to a HD camera. It's a digital Canon T3i, and it looks great, it sounds great, it's like got a microphone up there. But the thing about it is, before I was even using this camera, you guys were still watching, because you didn't necessarily care about how it looked, you just cared what was in the video. You see where I'm going with this? And no question, my videos way back when looked god awful. But the more important thing was, well, hopefully the more important thing for you was just what the content was, what I was saying. And it's the same with films, the story comes first. What you find more often, what I find more often, is that people are more concerned with what kind of camera they're using. And when you're trying to figure out what camera to use to tell your story, whether you're a film student or professional in the business, it's never supposed to be what camera makes the story look better. It's the camera that helps you tell the story. If the story is there, then the camera will just simply help you tell it. The camera never comes first. I hope that made sense. I'm trying not to make this sound convoluted. So all that aside, but getting back to this documentary, it does a really good job of telling you the history and whatnot, and just telling you how we got to where we are now and the future, what we're going to. I did have some problems with it. For instance, you might not think it's really a flaw, but it's a bit distracting, and I was thinking about it. You can tell that this film was shot over a long period of time because they show Keanu Reeves in these interviews and his hair, like the length of it changes, just it's long, it's short, it's long, it's short. I mean, it's all over the freaking place. And if you're making a documentary where it takes a long ass time to shoot, which they generally always do take a long ass time to shoot, then you should probably plan ahead, because if the interviewer is going to be shown, then, you know, they want to, you know, don't make your appearance distracting. And the way some of the interviews are shot, like, they're shot traditionally, and you get like the, what is it, the median close-up, or just the close-up of the person talking. But then sometimes you get this guy to the side who's like holding the camera like this, and it's a little bit shaky, and it just looks weird. Sure, get a different angle, you know, make it look interesting, but I mean, seriously, just pick the good angle and stick with that. Another problem I had was that towards the end, they get into the issue of 3D, which a lot of you, I'm probably guessing, hate 3D. If not, interesting, but okay, you don't hate 3D. What was missing, though, I felt, was they never addressed IMAX. And I figured that they would, because, I mean, it's one of those things where we're moving towards more IMAX films, or more films that are being shot in IMAX. And not only that, but you got interviews with Chris Nolan and Wally Pfister who are using IMAX in their films, and yet it's never brought up. And of course, with any documentary, there were a few people that I wanted to see more of, you know, from the interviews, because it seemed like there were a few guys who got more screen time for whatever reason, whether the other people didn't have as much interesting footage, or whether they just didn't have that much to say about a certain topic, but I just wanted more interview footage from certain people. And yes, in case you're wondering, I am thinking of Chris Nolan, Wally Pfister, but hey, well, Christopher Nolan, Wally Pfister, you can't go wrong. But I'm also thinking of Martin Scorsese, but mostly those two. But those things aside, I do give this film credit for making it very interesting. I was never bored once. It was paced extremely well. And by the time it ended, you know, I almost wanted more. I felt like in a way that they could have expanded on it, you know. I mean, there was so much that could have been said by other artists, and I feel like if they had done some more interviews or just shown more footage, could have been a more in-depth and just kind of a, I don't know, just a better documentary. But as it is, Side by Side is a very solid documentary that I thoroughly enjoyed watching, and if you're somebody like me who is going into the film business, or somebody who just loves watching movies and appreciates art, then please, please, find some way to watch this movie, okay? You won't regret it, okay? You won't. So I'm gonna give Side by Side 4 out of 5 stars. And I'm very curious to know if you guys have an opinion of this, you know, if you've heard or read about this discussion, you know, what's your thought on film versus digital? Do you think film is dying? Do you like digital? Do you think that we need to strive for more films shot on film? Just any thoughts, really, just any thoughts on the subject. If you have any, please, I would love to hear them. And thank you for watching. Adios.